I can't believe you are still playing with the puppy. We've been home for 3 hours and you haven't moved.
So what?
So it's a little obsessive.
No, it's not.
Oh, really? On the cab ride home, I noticed you had puppy breath.
He made the first move.
I just wanted to let you know about my study group.
Oh, don't be a fuddy-duddy. I'll be your study buddy.
I'm about to embark on one of the great challenges of my scientific career.
This work right here is going to change history.
I think this is going to be our greatest mission.
I don't have time to study. I'll never get into Stanford.
I got big plans for you tonight. I got maps, I got charts. I got to see you through this because my credibility is on the line.
It's at this point that you'll want to start taking notes.
Welcome to the Sitcom Study, the podcast where we contemplate the TV shows we grew up with and search for the truth and wisdom within the tropes and cliches. And Amy, what's the trope we're talking about today?
We're getting a pet, Jay.
Getting a pet. I want to start right out here. I often ask you a question about your experience with this trope. I'm going to ask you this time just a straight up factual question. What percentage of families in our nation, the United States, do you think have a pet?
Oh, I think it's pretty high.
Yeah, well, you want to venture?
I'm going to say 68%.
That is remarkably close. Approximately 66% of U.S. households, or about 86.9 million families, own a pet.
Wow.
This is up from 56% in 1988.
Look at my guesstimation.
Yeah, and I was mulling this over this morning because I was thinking of how, getting a pet in a TV show, of course, this is a trope from real life. This is not one of these traveling through time because of your time-traveling microwave things. But this is sort of like we've talked about how something like learning how to drive or your first day of school are these very kind of universal things that almost everybody experiences. And so they're casting a wide net when they make a TV episode about that.
Right.
And then there's certain things like going to jail that very few people experience. And we all have this collective...
Everybody has anxiety about.
Yeah, we all have this collective sort of mysticization or something about it. Getting a pet is one that's some people have pets, some people don't. Some people want to have a pet, but they can't have it. Some people have a pet, but they don't want it. And I think especially as a kid, that's a source of lots of interesting tension. You go to your friend's house and they have a dog and you can't have one because your dad's allergic, or, do you like cats or dogs and all, there's just lots of interesting, it's a very sort of heterogeneous world that we live in with pets. Lots of different opinions and feelings and stuff. And I think that's why it makes a good, subject for a good show.
Yeah, and I think at some point in everyone's life, well, maybe not everybody, but big portion of people at some point in their life will have a pet or will want one, and it just not be the right time, as we hear so often in these shows.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain big things. Allergies and living in a city are two big reasons why many people don't have pets. And obviously, you can have certain kinds of pets and live in a city, but it's still between the restrictions, not being allowed to in certain places and stuff. It is a whole different world for people that live in cities. But yeah,
or
lots
just
of
renters
reasons.
in general. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But so we are now currently both the proud keepers, masters, owners, roommates, whatever you call it.
Yeah, I think she's in charge.
Yeah, of a little caninus taco dogus. I don't know what it
So yeah, our studio dog is, she's part Chihuahua.
But tell me about your first pet. What was that?
Oh, that's okay. So this is
tell me briefly.
Well, so it's a funny story, but not in the same fashion of getting a pet. So we had been, trying to talk my parents into getting a dog for a while. I think we put together not a PowerPoint presentation because that wasn't a thing yet, but we made posters to try to explain here will be the division of labor. My
you
brother
went down to Kinko's Marshall.
No, we just drew things on poster board. But yeah, we definitely did that. And Mark, my little brother, was, I'm going to say, like 5 or 6, and I was about 10. And that's when we got our dog, Barney. And the story behind it is I threw a hissy fit. I got in a big fight with my mom, threw a fit. I don't even remember what it was about, but I like slammed something that I was holding down on the ground in our living room, and it bounced off the floor. Like I threw it down so hard that it bounced off the floor and into one of the window panes in our big windows in the front living room and shattered one of the window panes. And so I got grounded and I wasn't allowed to go to pick out the dog.
Oh,
so
wow.
The dog, our dog Barney, my little brother selected.
Right. And you always looked at him askance because
it was Mark's dog,
you were
not
like
my
the
dog, right?
stepdad, or you were like the guy who,
Like the
who didn't think
stepsister.
that the baby is really his. Yeah, and Barney was a beagle, right?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
we have that in common. My dog, Molly, when I was a kid, was also a beagle. I don't really have I don't have funny anecdotes or angle or anything on it. I remember really, really wanting a dog like a kid.
Was your brother
in a
into
TV
it
show.
too?
Yeah, but I think that we were pretty young. I don't know how old exactly, but I'm going to guess I was probably about 10 when we got Molly, which means my brother would have been about 7. So I feel like I was just more at that age, going to friends' houses and things, seeing shows on TV and stuff, movies, and just really, really wanting a dog. And for some reason, the two kinds of dog that I was most interested in were beagles and basset hounds.
Okay, they kind of look the same.
Yeah, but in
those are also the ones that are on TV.
I was going to say, I think
like
it has to do with
Snoopy's a beagle.
Yeah, I mean, you can't tell that he's a beagle.
No, you can't tell he's a beagle.
But yeah,
but Snoopy's a beagle, and then Huckleberry Hound is a basset hound.
And there's a basset hound in The Great Mouse Detective, which is a movie that I liked a lot as a kid. But I think we kind of dodged a bullet with that choice. No offense to the basset hound people, but I think for kids, a basset hound would have been a little bit of a, what's the word? Yeah, like a little bit of a lethargic
right.
choice.
Yeah.
Choice.
Well,
for
the
a
good
dog.
thing, and I mean, I think I'll say I agree with you in terms of having beagles as like the family dog when you have kids. But like our beagle was, she was basically a mutt, and she was the runt of the litter, and so the owner had
Barry was a girl?
Huh?
You keep saying she.
Barney.
Yeah. You
Not
keep saying
Barry.
she. Okay, fine, Barney. But you keep saying she.
Oh, yeah, no, he.
Okay.
You're right. I was like, what do you mean Barry? Barry's my granddad. What are you talking about? I was so confused.
Continue.
Okay. So I think you really luck out like having a beagle when you have kids. Like ours was the runt of the litter. Yeah, like the breeders didn't want him because he was too small and whatever. And so we ended up getting Barney, and he was a pretty cool dog, super chill, a little bit of a howler, as kind of all hounds are. It wasn't too bad. It was just like if we left him. Yeah. So, those are some of the trials and tribulations of having dogs when you have 2 working parents and 2 kids who are in school. Like, what do you do when the animal is home alone during the day? Which is not actually anything we get to deal with in these episodes.
Yeah, no, because it's a sitcom. Everybody spends, 97% of their lives in their living room. Right? There's... and I think the last thing I'll say about this is I feel like having animals in a show, like it makes perfect sense because I love, dogs and all kinds of animals. It makes the show more enjoyable to have them on, but it stresses me out live animals being used in entertainment of any
general,
kind.
Yeah,
and we'll see, like in this Webster episode, this little dog hates the way Webster is picking him up at certain points.
He doesn't hate the way Webster's picking him up. He just wants to run around. He's like a full-on puppy.
Whatever it is, like I don't want to be so like bleeding heart that I'm like, oh my God, they're mistreating. Like I'm sure these animals had more or less okay lives.
Yeah, they're totally fine. There's always trainers right there.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that the whole thing of having these animals in these movies and shows and the way that they train them and everything. It just, I don't know, it makes me a little uncomfortable these days, and
It makes me just as uncomfortable as child stars. How about that?
Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said for that. At least, like, if you're talking about really, really young child stars. But yeah, I guess what I'm saying is now that we've got CGI animals, I'm happy for that, even though they don't really have them in sitcoms. All right, what are our episodes? What have we
watched Leave It to Beaver, Season 1, Episode 2, Captain Jack, What's Happening, Season 1, Episode 10, Puppy Love, Webster, Season 2, Episode 13, It's a Dog's Life, and Will and Grace, Season 1, Episode 9, The Truth About Will and Dogs.
Yeah, we've watched Leave It to Beaver a handful of times now, but this is Season 1, Episode 2.
Yeah, it's actually the first episode they filmed, but it was the second episode they aired. So, I mean, you are seeing baby Wally and very little Beav. Like, the Beav kind of stayed, he had that baby face, so he stayed young throughout, whereas I feel like Wally kind of quickly graduated into, like, sort of a more, like, teenage heartthrob, and you can see that coming. Like, Wally is such a cute kid.
Well, and the way they have him dressed in the first scene, he's dressed like Pony Boy from The Outsiders. Like, he's got the little greaser t-shirt rolled up.
He's super cool.
Yeah, and then meanwhile, Beaver is always dressed like a little dad with his little plaid shirt tied up and tucked in.
That's true.
But before we even get to them, I don't know if this was always the first season or if it was because it was the very first one, but they've got this little narration, this little Rod Serling type.
Like
imagine you are a 9-year-old
Now
boy.
we join. No, it wasn't like that, but it was like, now we join Leave It to Beaver.
But
when
he says
tonight they're going to adopt an alligator from the comic book.
He goes, when you're young, a policeman stands 10 feet tall. Like, it's got this sort of like
setting
abstract, kind of vibe to it. And yeah, I was curious if every episode started like that for a while. It's almost like Daniel Stern in the Wonder Years, you know, that sort of like
a little bit.
It was a raucous time. It was a happy time, a sad time, a time of confusion.
Well, Leave It to Beaver wasn't a looking back kind of a show.
No, but it has that vibe.
Kind of
Again,
setup.
when this guy is saying, what was life like when you were but a child? But yeah, then we get into the proper sitcom of it. And it's all about Wally and Beaver send away. Is it in a magazine or
it's
a
in
comic
the back
book?
of a comic book. Yeah. The comic book, it says something about robots from Mars on a fake cover. But of course, like, internet sleuths have done a little digging. And once they actually zoomed in on one of the pages, people could tell it was some actual comic from 1957.
Okay.
Something from Adventure Comics.
Oh, that's where Superman is from.
Okay, Adventure Comics, and it was featuring Superboy, and the story was entitled The Super Teacher from Krypton.
Interesting. Well, yeah, this was a thing. Like, they still had this.
We were talking about this not too long ago, and you were like so incredulous, like, who would buy things out of the back of a comic book?
Well,
and I'm like, it's the same as now where we buy things off the internet and Instagram ads.
Yeah, but the difference is that there were all these things. I think the part that I find so, old-timey is that you mailed them, that you had to send them.
Self-addressed stamped envelope,
A lot of times it would be things like you would mail them. You would get in touch with them by mail. They would mail you a catalog, and then you would cut out a thing from the catalog and check off what you wanted. But in this case,
an order form, yes.
Yeah, they're skipping that step. And yes, this was a thing.
This is just like the Sea Monkeys, right?
Yes, exactly. Sea Monkeys is probably the biggest
$2.50 for a live Florida alligator.
Yes. And that's my only point, is just in yesteryear, this was like a common way that you bought outlandish things. It is from ads, direct mail ads in comic books. So it comes in the mail, right?
Yeah, they get a note from the post office saying it's been delivered, that they can go pick it up. So then we have a little scene where Wally and the Beav are at the post office, and they're expecting this 8-foot alligator, because in the picture it's as tall as the guy, but it's standing on its tail, and so there's still some of its tail on the ground that it's balancing on.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh man, how are they going to ship this huge alligator? And they they don't even think about where they're going to keep it.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
But then it arrives.
What was their plan?
unknown. And then it arrives and it's just a little shoebox with some holes poked in it.
Right. And so they open it and it is a real live little alligator.
Yes.
And they're disappointed. I would think like this is still pretty cool. Like this little 6-inch alligator.
They're disappointed that it is not big. And then they were like, well, maybe if we feed it and give it some space, it'll grow.
Right, so let's just hang on here. Why do these kids not have a healthy fear of alligators, especially since one of them is the size of a small animal that an alligator would eat? Like, why do these kids not, why do they think it's a good idea?
Well, first of all, they don't live in an area where there are alligators, so they're just these
But if they know what they are at all, don't they know that they're
not
big, scary animals?
And
I am very scared of alligators, and I think it makes good sense.
The first time Jay came to visit my family home in Florida, we went for a walk in the neighborhood, and he was like, do I have to be worried about alligators here?
Yes.
And I'm like, no. You are not a child or a small dog. You don't have to be worried about alligators walking on the sidewalk in the middle of a neighborhood.
I worry about bears up here. I worry about alligators down there. Beaver and Wally.
I've seen more bears in Florida than I have alligators, just so you know.
They don't care. They're just like, we want this alligator to be as big as possible.
Right. They're like, we're excited now. We're going to figure out what we need to feed it. So then they go to their local alligator farm. That's like, you probably didn't have these because they aren't around here, right? So growing up,
definitely did not.
That
have
was like a
farms.
tour. That was like a tourist attraction. You could go and you could see the live alligators.
Absolutely.
And that was like a totally normal thing. Like every town had a little one, whatever. And so, I've been to many of those. I know what that is, but I was surprised to see that they had one in California where the, Wally and the Beaver supposedly are growing up. So they went to Captain Jack's alligator farm.
Yeah.
And were sitting in on the tour. And so it seems to me that they'd been there before, right? Because they were chatting with...
This is one of their standard haunts.
Right. They were chatting with Captain Jack and they knew him by name. And they were like, hey, so what should we do?
I didn't get that impression, to be honest. I thought they knew him by name because he had introduced himself as part of the tour.
Potentially.
The way he was
It was just that they were able to go to this place by themselves without their parents.
Well,
made me
50s,
think...
I think that my dad was riding the subway to the ball game when he was like the Beavers age.
young.
But this guy, the way he interacts with them is kind of like, "Are you little kiddies? Like, come on up."
But and that's another thing. Like before Crocodile Dundee and the Crocodile Hunter, oftentimes the guys in these alligator farms would do more of like a piratey thing, like old salty sea dogs who, wrestle alligators and keep the alligators at bay. So he tells them, so they are joining his little tour and he spouts off at least 7 erroneous alligator facts.
Now let's stop there.
I'm
There's one
scoffing all the way through this as a girl from Florida. I'm like, nope, lies, wrong.
There's a recurring joke that I think is very funny in this episode where
the sawing.
He says, someone asks like, what would happen if you went in there or something? And he goes like, oh, the alligator wouldn't bite off your arm. He would saw it off. You see, the way alligators bite, their teeth are like saws. So it's really more accurate to say that he would saw off your arm. And then several times throughout the episode, people go like, it was really more like a saw. Now
when he bit me, it really wasn't a bite. It felt more like a saw.
I wasn't sure at first that the joke was going to be that everything this guy says is wrong. So when he says that alligators are cannibals, I was like, that seems very strange to me.
They keep referring to them as cannibals. Right. And then one time he says they will like bite other alligators and eat the little ones. They'll bite each other. They'll fight each other. They will, like the mom alligators are really protective of the babies because the dad will come back and eat them. Like the male alligators don't know who theirs are. And so it's not like families. It's not like, they have that kind of brain power. So they'll come like the male alligators during the birthing seasons, the female alligators are very aggressive. That's when you have to be careful if you're walking in lowland areas and wetland areas in Florida.
Careful all the time.
But because the mom alligators are really aggressive to keep away the predators who are coming after the babies, including the male alligators.
Yeah, but for the most part, when I think of alligators, I picture them all just kind of like lying there placidly in a swamp, not eating each other.
They do like to sun, but they will fight, anyway. But so, but they are carnivores, right? They are meat eaters. They mention them multiple times as cannibals, as they eat each other, which is not 100% really true. And then they also talk about how they won't bite you, they'll like saw you, which is absolutely inaccurate.
Like, it doesn't make sense.
What an alligator does when it bites you is it drags you to the bottom of whatever body of water is nearby and it drowns you. And then it'll snack on you at its leisure.
Yeah, and you just picture the way an animal opens its mouth like that. It's a hinge. It's not like a conveyor that's going to slide the teeth back and forth.
Because their jaw, like the way it protrudes, looks like a saw blade.
Yeah. Random sidebar. There was a movie that came out in the early 2000s. It might be the most misleading advertising campaign for any film I've ever seen. My brother and I went to see it. I forget the title of the movie, but the whole notion of it was the real life story of the most prolific serial killer of all time. And you didn't know until you saw the movie that it was an alligator.
It was an alligator.
It took place in Africa, and it was about an alligator that ate everybody. Anyway,
funny.
The last bit of information that this guy gives us is when the Beaver and Wally, after his presentation, take him aside and say, we've got this little alligator. He's not doing well. What should we do? This guy's like, what he says is, if you don't care, pretty soon the alligator won't care. He's talking about how your whole sort of
attitude. If you give up on him, he'll give up on himself.
Yeah, your attitude and level of effort and everything is what's going to determine whether or not this alligator thrives.
Lives or dies.
Yeah. And then he gives them all kinds of crazy feeding instructions.
Warm milk mixed with brandy in an eyedropper because the brandy makes him happy. I'm like, now I know why your alligators are so lazy.
Yeah, which did make me wonder, would alcohol even work on cold-blooded animals like that, on reptiles? Can you get an alligator drunk? I guess
they still have blood, and the blood still circulates.
But I just wonder if at that point you're dealing with an anatomy that's so different.
Yeah, but in the same way, your dog can.
But you definitely can get dogs.
Exactly,
drunk.
Your dog can get drunk if it drinks the glass of wine that you left on the nightstand.
So again, it is the 50s or early 60s. So the same way it was common practice to give the baby a little vermouth if they're crying or something. He's
vermouth. No, geez Louise, what's wrong with you?
Give the alligator some brandy.
Whiskey,
And eggs is part of the equation somewhere.
Yeah,
he says when he gets older, you can introduce eggs to the diet.
Yeah, when he gets a little bigger, once he's doing a little better, you can start giving him raw eggs.
Yeah, so I'm assuming all of this is hogwash, but we get a nice little montage of the boys taking care of this little alligator.
Yeah,
this is a real life alligator,
they got
or some lizard.
Yeah, some of the images, some of the shots are with a real life baby alligator, and then some of them are, I'm sure a little rubber thing.
Oh yeah,
sitting there.
And there's really it's mostly hero shots of the little alligator by itself, or with some unseen person.
They have him sitting. They have him sitting in the shoebox, and then they transfer him into the sink, and then Captain Jack tells them not to have him in water for so long because it'll dry out his skin. Yeah. They like to get in and out of the water, so they move him onto a plank in the toilet tank, and that is his aquarium. Yeah. Which I thought was because they're hiding him from their parents, so I thought that was such an ingenious little way to have the toilet tank.
But that means he's in the pitch black tank all the time. I feel like he's in solitary confinement for turtles.
I didn't think about the darkness, but they do have him. They get him out quite often and whatever. I didn't think about that. I just thought that was so interesting that they were like, oh, your aquarium, and they put him in the toilet tank. According to IMDb, this is the first time a toilet was ever shown on television, and it was just the tank that was shown.
That's funny. Yeah. Wow. They're like, all right, not an inch lower. I didn't even think about that. We have a sort of side aspect of this going on where the Cleavers have a housekeeper named Minerva.
Yes.
Now, you were incredulous, like you didn't recognize her.
Yeah, well, so this is episode 2, and I was like, what? So June Cleaver is known for always cleaning. Like, that is like, she's, who am I trying to be? June Cleaver, Donna Reed, always cleaning in a perfect dress and pearls? Like,
yeah.
Right? Like, that's
But in
that's
those
the
days,
whole
you
persona.
cleaned, the women cleaned even when the housekeeper
Even when they had a
was
house
around.
cleaner. Well, so yeah, we never see her again.
All right, so this is just early going, just trying things out.
Well, and it was a plot point,
Yes,
right?
exactly. It becomes a plot point.
Right, it's a plot point. She's singing along, and they're noticing. So the parents, over the course of a few weeks, are noticing that 4 eggs a week are going missing.
At first, the dad's
The
like, look, my
brandy-
brandy went down by like an inch. And then a week
it was
later,
2
it's like
inches,
half gone.
and then half the bottle. Exactly. And so he's keeping an eye on his brandy
Yeah,
that keeps
the
getting
mom's
lower. The mom's
beauty
keeping an eye on
cream.
the eggs. And yes, and they took the beauty cream as well. They took a bottle of beauty cream
There's just
to
a funny
keep him
offhanded
oiled.
line where Wally goes like, oh, and I also took mom's beauty cream, and we can, to
we
keep
got
his
to keep
skin
his
good.
skin moist so he doesn't dry out. We keep him oiled with beauty cream. Who knows what was in
Yeah.
it?
There's also
probably toxic to the alligator, but whatever. He survived. He was doing fine. So he just kept getting bigger and bigger, and he outgrew the toilet tank. So they decided to put him down in the unused laundry tub in the basement. And then off Minerva goes after, 3 weeks to a month of the parents noticing all these things going missing. And Minerva comes in, she's singing, she goes down to the basement to do the laundry, she's screaming.
Yeah, well, but wait, before she screams, they think they've got this open and shut.
Well, the dad
goes, doesn't Minerva seem unnecessarily gay this morning?
And there's a chipper because she's singing. And
yeah, 2 of our episodes use the word gay in this one.
Oh,
and
it's
we're
like
not
happy?
talking about Will and Grace.
Yeah, no, they use the word gay for a different reason.
Yeah. And so, it's funny. I want to pause and just say in general, the dad was very funny to me in this episode. He looks just like Alan Thicke to me. He's got that same little nose. He reminds me a lot of the Growing Pains dad played by Alan Thicke.
Yeah.
And just his suspicions, his faces when Minerva's going around singing her little songs and he's looking at the bottle of brandy and looking back at the mom and going like, I see what's going on here.
Right.
Why can't you connect
and
the dots?
June is like, absolutely not. That, she always is singing. It's not like that. And he was like, and then she screams.
Right. She comes running up saying
and has this
alligator
crazy
in the thing.
story about there's an alligator down in the laundry tub. And,
Ward, the dad, is so dismissive.
Oh,
It's
he's
funny
so patronizing.
how
He just
dismissive and
grabs her hat
condescending.
and coat and is like, let's talk about it at the bus
Everything
station.
he's saying, he's just like he is treating her like a raving lunatic.
Right.
Just
well, like a total
the
drunkard.
Rantings,
And he's not being mean. He's just like, you're drunk. We're going to take care of you. I'm going to
he's
take you
going,
home.
Let's talk to her when she's feeling a little better, if
Right,
you know what I mean.
exactly. And June is like, well, wait a minute. Well, and Ward just rushes Minerva out the door. And so then June starts kind of looking around the house and having a think. And then she decides to go down to the basement. And she, too, sees the alligator.
Yeah. So when the dad gets back, the mom
like,
says,
do you know what your sons have done?
Yeah. So when the dad goes to see for himself, he comes back up. And that's when I thought it was very funny. When he's like, he bit me. Actually, now that I think about it, he kind of sawed me.
He sawed at me. It was sort of sawing motion.
And so that's when we really sort of slip into your standard kind of sitcom getting a pet mode. They go, oh, this is going to break their little hearts. And they have to have
and
a
they had
talk
already
with the kids.
had a conversation about why they weren't responsible yet enough to have a pet. And then this is what is always so classic about this show, right? They don't go up like guns blazing, yelling at the kids, why'd you do this behind our back, all that. No. They have like a calm conversation on the couch about their children's motivations.
Yeah.
And then the dad goes upstairs and is like, I'm very proud of you boys. And the boys are like, what? What do you mean? I thought we'd be in trouble. And he's like, no, you kept this alligator not only a secret, but you kept it alive. You took care of it for all this time. And he's healthy and thriving, and we have to find a place for him because he's not safe here anymore. And it's not, he's getting too big. But yeah, it was like they really thought about, almost in the sense of like the popularity now of gentle parenting and thinking about like your children's motivations and why they are doing a thing and what were their thought processes to get to a certain place. And so it's just so interesting to see that in this like 1957 show.
It is. And it's nice how sort of simpatico the family is, but it also like Ward Cleaver does such a bad job of getting to the heart of the matter when he's explaining to the boys why they, like he's trying to say, first of all, I disagree with him. They're keeping him a secret and lying about the alligator is kind of bad. And like, I feel like he kind of brushes by that, but also.
Yeah. I mean, he's like, and he does say like, yeah, that's not great.
Yeah.
But
when
like,
he's
look
explaining,
what you did do.
Yeah. But, and what he's trying to say, and this is why they'll ultimately be rewarded. He's saying you did demonstrate a sort of commitment and responsibility that I didn't think you had. And so that is good. But as he's trying to explain why they can't have this alligator, and he's like, well, boys, like, he just won't be happy. It's just, alligators don't really like to hang out with people. And I feel like I'm the last sane person in an insane world. He's an alligator. He's dangerous. Like, why doesn't he say alligators are dangerous? They are not pets. He will eat you. You
Not
are
yet.
3 feet tall. That is why you can't have him. And he's dancing
You're
around
letting
it.
your fear lead you, Jay.
He's talking about it like, it just wouldn't be quite right. Like,
Well, and look, I think he is trying to kind of explain that it's not like this is not a forever pet. This pet has to go to a place where he will survive, and because he won't be safe here for himself or us. And so they take him to Captain Jack, and Captain Jack's happy to have him. And it is a much bigger, like it's a 2-hander, it's like about like a 1.5
but you could tell
alligator.
they didn't let the kids ever handle the big one,
No,
right?
they
would
did not.
always, because I feel like his growth kind of went back and forth, because during his training montage, I think he got a little bigger,
Right.
and then when the kids had to handle him, they stuck him back to the,
They had the
to the little guy
one,
again.
yeah.
But I think we forgot to mention that at some point they named the little alligator Captain Jack after their
Yes,
mentor
they did.
in gator training.
Right.
And so, they give him a home at Captain Jack's place. And the one thing I want to ask about this is, why are they all dressed in suits?
I was thinking the same
Like,
thing.
are
It
they
was
on their
almost
way
like a
home from-
funeral or
Yeah.
is it church or something.
Yeah.
No, I think they just put on their Sunday best to go say
go to the
goodbye
alligator
to go say
farm.
goodbye to their alligator. I know
guess.
they were very dressed up. It looked like they were coming home from church.
Yeah, and I wondered if at this time, like 1961 or whatever, it's like that went without saying. It's like, it's a Sunday. Like, they're decent people. Obviously. They're going to
Obviously.
church. And so, like, the average viewer wouldn't even, like, challenge it. But
Or maybe it was like they put on their Sunday best as like a send off to their gator.
that is also what I thought. But then I was like, but then why didn't they do anything with that? Like have some little like gator marriage or something. Like it was bizarre that they were dressed so nicely. But they drop him off, and just when we thought that this was going to be a lineup of 3 dog episodes and a reptile episode,
Yes.
they come home to the surprise that their parents have gotten them a dog. He's waiting for them in Captain Jack's old bed or
yes,
a
yep.
terrarium or whatever.
Not terrarium, just a little box.
Yeah, and there you have it. I thought this was good. I thought this was funny.
This was really good.
Yeah.
They never see that dog again, though, by the way.
I was wondering about that because in my research for this trope, I didn't come across any other Leave It to Beaver episodes. Yeah, this was before TV, episodes had to really have any continuity from one to the next.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like this. And I think what we're going to see is like these episodes, while they have this story thing in common of getting a pet, there's almost going to be like zero overlap, I feel like, in the angle that the different shows take on it. So let's start tracking
so
that.
This one was like, I sneak a pet.
Yes,
and I keep
keeping
it
a secret from mom and dad
Yeah.
is like the crux of this, right?
Yeah, and we do have that again later on.
Yeah, I guess. All right, let's see what happens in our next show, which is What's Happening?
Season 1, episode 10, Puppy Love.
Yeah, so this is our first time covering What's Happening.
Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, this was, I didn't watch this as a kid, so I had this vague understanding of, you had JJ was like the breakout character from
Good Times.
And Rerun was like the one that everybody knew from What's Happening.
Yes.
And Mama, I guess, to a certain extent, but I don't know. I guess
She
there's
left
also,
after like season 1 or 2.
Okay, so
Yeah.
maybe I'm confusing it with like Mama's House or something. I don't know.
Don't
there
know.
was like little tidbits of iconography sort of floating around in my mind, but I didn't really have much of a sense of this.
Well, and this show went off the air in 1979. It had 3 seasons, went off the air, and then in 1985 they brought it back called What's Happening Now, and they were like just graduated from college, or I don't think Rerun ever went to college. He just like got a local job, but so they were like young adults, and they tried again and again. They ran for 3 seasons and canceled, and every single time the show got canceled, it was due to the cast saying we should get more money, and the producers saying no, we're the real talent. We're doing the writing and the marketing for the show. You're not talented. And both times they were like, the actors accused the studios of racism.
Interesting.
And walked.
Well, the setup is, I guess I can't tell, is this like a Parker Lewis thing where it's like the 3 friends?
It's about the 3 friends. Yeah.
Okay.
This is, okay, so the way this all came to be was, we've watched Good Times, right? So Norman Lear, who did All in the Family and some of the other shows in that time, I think The Jeffersons as well, he split off his producing partners that started Good Times with him when things started getting a little touchy over there at Good Times, because again, the cast was saying we're moving in a direction that's moving away from a good Black family telling good Black stories, just, happening to live in an area where there's a lot of poverty. When all that started going down over there, Norman Lear and some of his producing partners split. And this team who started this show are those people that left Good Times. And they decided to kind of take some of those ideas, but instead of telling a story about a family, they were going to tell a story about the teenagers. And so this is the 3 guys and their friends and their lives, and it kind of focuses mostly on the kids and all of that. And at the end of season 1 in this show, the mom was like, hey, you mentioned Mama. She was like, hey, let's have my ex-husband, who's like a guest star. We saw him in this episode. Why don't you have him come back and we'll get the family back together, and then we can have, a good, strong Black family raising at least one of these kids and have that on television. And the producers was like, nope, that's not the direction we're going in. And then she got more and more disgruntled throughout season 2. And then I got fired or something, or quit, and like at the end of season 2. So yeah, like all of these racial tensions. And when we talk about any of these Black-led shows from the 70s, all of them ended with the casts having these tensions with the white management and the white writers. I was just going to say, are there any of them where the creators are Black and where there is any significant presence? It wasn't until the Cosby Show behind the camera. Okay. And that was the shift. And so when you got Cosby, and I don't remember what his company was called, but he was the one. He was the producer. He was the Norman Lear. Dr. William Cosby educational philosophy degree. Yeah, right. Ed D. But yeah, so he was like the Norman Lear. He was the creator and the showrunner and the producer behind it. So and then obviously was hiring more Black writers for those shows. Right. So there's basically an element of,
exploitation with
100%.
these earlier shows. And so you have, like, with all of that kind of media, same thing with the movies, this sort of prickly relationship to it where in some ways it's positive and gives people opportunities and representation and all of that. There is also this element of it that's a little icky and is, you know, and messes up the representational aspect of it.
And when the people who are are the talent and doing the representation, their voices aren't heard at the table in the spaces that are all white that are producing the things, it causes those tensions.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, this show would have been right up your alley because it's about the kids. Like, this is the kind of stuff you liked.
Yes.
But like I said, it went off the air in 1979, and that was when we were born. So we didn't really see much of it. I used to get this show confused because I did see some of it in reruns. I saw rerun in reruns. It only had 65 episodes, so it wasn't like one of those ones that actually was in syndication, but you would see it every now and then, right? There were some, it would be on reruns. I got rerun confused with Fat Albert.
One of them is an animated character.
Right, but
that wasn't enough to distinguish them.
I thought the cartoon was built off of this same character because they always were making fat jokes about each other. And I was like, how come the one guy goes, hey, and the other guy doesn't?
Right.
And then it wasn't until I got older that I kind of realized, these are two separate universes.
Fat Albert is the aforementioned William Cosby. Yep. But yes, it's understandable. Let's just discuss reruns ensemble right now while we're on him. He sports an orange beret, a fluffy vest of some kind, a different kind of orange shirt.
I would say not always a fluffy vest, but that was in this episode.
And then these big, silky, almost like MC Hammer pants.
But you're forgetting the most important thing.
And the red suspenders.
Always. So he's got, you said orange, I call it red, but he's got like a red beret and red suspenders, and that is his look. There's elements of this that I'm like, they definitely picked up on these things for Keenan and Kel and Good Burger.
I was going to say, when you mentioned Fat Albert, that he does kind of look like the movie version of Fat Albert, because he and Keenan, that smile, that kind of silly smile. Yeah, definitely. He's got a little bit of a Keenan energy. But yeah, I agree with you. I like this thing of three friends at a diner. This is right up my alley. This is the black 70s version of Saved by the Bell.
Right. And the Roger, but they call him Raj. He's got a little sister named Dee.
Yes.
And
I like her.
And she's the spunky little sister who's always causing trouble.
But she is in this episode, her role is entirely to be the salacious crumb to her mother's Jabba the Hutt. She's just a little henchman that just sits perched on her mother's, and that's not a comment on the mom's appearance, by the way, but she just sits perched next to her mom on the couch as her little henchman and just sneers at the brother, and just everything the mom says, she's just like, that's right, you heard her. Now what are you gonna do? I found her very funny.
Yeah, she had some fun moments where the mom was like scolding her, and she was like, "Oh, did you hear that, Raj? She was so mad. She said my name instead of yours."
Yeah. So we're going to start with the kids at the diner.
Yep.
We're going to never see any dogs in this one. No. We should get that out of the way.
Shirley at the diner was also one of like the kind of famous characters. Like we got a little bit in this episode of them like calling her dog faced and calling her stupid. That was actually the opening line of this scene was them talking something about a dog and then being like, "Oh, we already got one. Hey, Shirley." And she comes over, but she is like not one of their crew, but she, because she's a little bit older than them, but she gives them shit.
But she's part of the cast. She's, the sassy waitress. I also feel like I recognize that actress. Like she's maybe a character actress that would pop up in other things sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. But this was like the big break for her. Like I know her from this, and she and Rerun would both go on to kind of have like good scenes that were sort of memorable from this show, not this episode, but like this series.
All right, so let's get to the heart of the matter here, because this is pretty straightforward. Raj is tutoring Patrice. She's their friend at school, and she has a dog named Susie.
Yes.
And she has said that in exchange for him tutoring her, if she passes the test...
Her mom has said this.
Okay, the mom has said that Raj can get one of the puppies, one of Susie the dog's puppies.
Right.
When she has the puppies. And so in every scene, Raj is asking Patrice, how's Susie doing? When are the puppies coming? Oh,
Right.
she's going to burst any day now.
And he is having to kind of play this game because his mom has, like all our parents in all of these episodes, has said no
Yes.
to having a dog.
That's a trope we definitely can track. The parents are always skeptical of the pets for one reason or another.
And the children's ability to be responsible
Yes.
enough to care for them. And so the mom has kind of said no to Raj's other, entreaties to get a pet. But this time he thinks he's got to find exactly the right time. He's going to let her know that, he's getting the dog for free. And it's because he was doing this nice thing of helping this girl pass her tests and on, math and history, and like specifically. And so, every time he goes to say, hey, mom, this is what I'm getting in exchange for the tutoring, something happens. She ends up in a bad mood. And he's like, nope, it's not the right time. I'll try again later.
Yes. And so we get a classic sitcom misunderstanding in the core of this episode, where the daughter, Dee, the little sister, is practicing her spelling. There's a recurring thing in this that I found very strange, where daughter always has to practice her spelling. She has a block about how to spell the word secretary. Now, here's the thing. I think secretary is a difficult word to spell, but she keeps getting stuck on the R, which I find strange. She keeps going S-E-C, and then she can't remember what happens next.
If it's
and this girl is
secretary
like
or
12 years old at
secretary,
least.
yeah.
Now, if you got hung up on whether it was an E or an A after the R, that would be a mental block that I could relate to. If you can't remember the R, that tells me you don't know how to read at all. But anyway, the girl is sitting on the couch practicing her spelling, and then she kind of ducks down.
She hears the boys coming downstairs, and she wants to eavesdrop so she can have more dirt to get him in trouble later. And they're talking about Susie being about to give birth.
Yes.
And they're so excited. And what do we have to get to prepare to take care of the, of it, and they don't say baby, but then Rerun says, well, all babies are alike. Babies are babies, right? Speaking about you just need to get some milk, and you just need to get some a nice warm place for them to sleep.
Yeah, all of the things that they don't say, right? In order for this misunderstanding to happen, they have to say Susie, the name of the dog, but not Patrice, the name of the girl, right? The dog needs to have this normal, and look, my dog was named Molly, yours was Barney. So I'm not saying you have to name your dog something like so
Fido.
Crazy, but my girlfriend in college had an iguana named Dave. I thought that was such a come on, you don't want to get a little more adventurous?
I love that. That's so fun.
I feel like, if you name your dog Susie, you're just asking for this kind of misunderstanding. But so anyway,
okay, whatever.
They have to only mention the dog's name and not the person's name. They have to avoid, this is like the game Taboo. They have to not say the word dog, puppy, litter, any of these. They have to talk in this exact purposefully ambiguous way.
Well, and that's why you hear that's why the writers did what they did, which was they're like, well, all babies are babies, right? All babies need the same things: a nice warm place to sleep, some milk, just kind of going with that kind of thing, saying that puppies and babies, they all kind of need the same thing.
So they leave the little sister with the impression that Raj has impregnated this girl that he's tutoring, right? Because conveniently they've never met. This is some new person that the rest of the family doesn't even know her name,
right?
So they think they've got her
this
pregnant.
Girl you've been spending all your time with is how the mom refers to her.
Yeah, and the mom is against this from the beginning.
Yeah, she doesn't
he's
think,
getting poor grades.
She doesn't think that he's really tutoring. She thinks he's dating this girl, and she's like, "Well, you keep saying that you're tutoring. What are you getting for all this tutoring?" Yeah. And he was like, and that's when he realized she was in a bad mood, and so he couldn't tell her now. So he said nothing, and she was like, "Yeah, right. You're getting something." And then that's so when Dee tells her what is going on, that this Susie is going to have a baby, and Raj is looking forward to taking care of it and all this other stuff. The mom loses it.
Yeah. She asks him, or the little sister gives her the phone number of the girl. She goes, "How did you get this phone number?" And she goes, "The number was in one of Raj's socks in his sock drawer in plain view."
Right.
I thought that was funny. And so the mom calls this number.
She calls Mrs. Williams, Patrice's mom.
Yes.
But doesn't know Patrice and asks about Susie.
The sitcomery just continues with the is it true? She goes, "Do you have a nice house and is Susie pregnant?"
Yes. And then the person on the other end of the phone says yes, and she passes out basically.
Yeah. I guess the next scene is the three boys come home.
Right. The mom has called her ex-husband.
Yes.
And is reading him the riot act. He's over there before the boys get home, and she's telling him, this is all because we got divorced.
This is code red. We've got
this
a
is
major
happening
crisis.
because we got divorced, and this is your fault, and then we find out that dad has been a philanderer because he's I'm sure it's a misunderstanding. Raj would never do that. That's not the type of boy he is. And he's like, "How did you know?" And she's like, "Well, I heard from Dee, but then I confirmed when I called the mom. And so, this is for real."
Yeah. And we should say, Norman Lear, orbital
Adjacent
type shows always have the live audience. They always have that sort of raucous energy. And so we're going to get the third sort of instantiation of this sitcom miscommunication continuing when the three boys come in and the audience is just losing it at all of the sort of ironic things that they're saying, going back and forth.
Because they're doing all of this double entendre about how much she likes it, and they work hard all night long.
Because it's that thing of
her best.
When the mom is like, "I know all about Susie and the babies," and Raj is like, "Oh, great, you do?" And she's like, "What have you been doing over there?" And he's like, Mom, I love doing it. I'm thinking of doing it for a living."
Right.
And the crowd is just dying. And then he goes "And my friends here rerunning what's his face, they're gonna help me." And she's like, "What?" She's literally passing out on the
"What
floor.
do you mean?" And the dad has to catch
screaming. Yes, this is just totally this. I love this about these old sitcoms.
Yeah, it was very fun.
The sitcom humor, just that central misunderstanding at the core of it, just spiraling out of control.
And no one stopping for a second to check their misconceptions.
And nobody says the word dog or puppy at any time in any of this.
Exactly.
Yes, it's very silly. And then the mom is delirious when they do finally say it's puppies. She's just it's something out of a Donald Duck cartoon or something. It's puppies. It's puppies. She's just drunk on the relief that her son has not impregnated this woman.
But then it turns out that Patrice didn't pass either of her tests.
Patrice didn't know that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. They established that earlier in the episode, which I have to say two random observations we haven't mentioned yet. One, collars extremely aggressive on this show. If collars could kill, absolute daggers, 7-inch collars coming out, and lots of misogyny. Every girl character in this is an idiot.
Yes.
Patrice is very stupid.
Yep, Patrice isn't very bright. Shirley, the waitress at the diner, isn't very bright, and the little sister Dee isn't very bright.
They have the scene where Shirley is trying to help Patrice with one of those a train leaves New York at blah 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 speed. It's the blind leading the blind. I forget what the exact joke is, but
Patrice
when
says,
they crash.
Yes, Patrice says when they crash, and she was like, "That's a pretty good answer," and so that's what they go with. But but also Rerun. They make fun of Rerun for being stupid, but they say Patrice is so dumb she's even dumber than Rerun.
Yeah, Rerun he's the Screech. He's not a nerd per se, but he's the punching bag, goofball, weirdo, whatever.
Well, he's also the one he's also the Zach, because he's the one that comes up with all their schemes.
That's true. He's the entrepreneur, as he describes himself in this. But okay.
And he's the one in real life that led the walkout in season 2 so that they could get paid more.
Interesting. I feel like even though we don't see any dogs in this, it still fits the trope really well. Like,
yeah,
this
totally.
has all of that sort of discussion of like, we can't handle a pet. I don't know, I guess...
and the secrecy, keeping it from your parents as well.
Yeah, and I guess in this one, the difference is with the beaver, it's more in the vein of like a Full House sort of like, we need to learn that our parents know best and the sort of foibles of like keeping a secret and stuff. Whereas with this, it's more of the comical misunderstanding.
Yes.
This is like something out of like a Shakespeare comedy or whatever, where
Well,
they're
and
missing
the kids
information.
are older. So like the idea that they wouldn't be as responsible doesn't fall as, doesn't hit as hard because they're not 7 years old like the Beav is.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Let's see how this continues in Webster.
Season 2, episode 13, It's a Dog's Life.
Yep, Webster's old friends with us at this point. We've seen him set his house on fire. He ran for class president. He helped somebody get their diner not turned into a parking lot.
Yes,
right?
that's right. Mm-hmm.
He's always
civic duty.
Yeah, he's always up to something. Now, we were wondering when this started out. I don't know if you looked it up. Is this in the wake of their fire? Is this why they're living at their friend's house or on this unfamiliar set?
Yes, this is. Let me just double check. But yes, it is. The fire happens midway through season 2, and this is midway through season 2.
Yeah.
They aren't in their apartment.
Right.
They are in a rental. They're staying. They happen to be friendly with their landlords, but those aren't their like friends. This is a rental house that they're staying in, and then later on, they rent a house or they end up buying a house that's very similar to this, a lot of wood and stuff that they're in for the rest of the series. But just let me double check when those episodes actually did air.
Uncle Phil, no relation to Uncle Phil from Fresh Prince, is coming to town.
No, this is Uncle Philip Long, and there was a really big story arc with him in season 1.
This is Ben Vereen, well-known
Ben Vereen.
actor / dancer, right?
Yes, and performer. Tony Award winner. I think,
what is
for
his
Pippin.
claim to fame? Pippin?
He was he was in the original cast of Pippin. He was the whatever that's called, the leading player, and then he was also. Is it Judas in
Jesus Christ
Superstar?
Gotcha. Yeah, he definitely. Yeah, he's got that energy, and he's Webster's biological uncle. I guess
he is, and so the storyline in season 1, which I'm sure we'll touch on anytime when we do our adoption trope, he, in the wake of Webster's parents' death. The parents had asked, right, that George, as his godfather or whatever, take care of him. But his uncle was very uncomfortable with Webster being raised by a white family.
And so he laid claim.
He fought for custody, and there was a whole series of events that happened throughout season 1, and there was a special double episode at the end of season 1 that kind of wrapped it all up.
I vaguely remember that.
As to like where he should actually stay. And, and then the Papadopouloses ended up actually adopting him. And Webster was super excited at first thinking that Uncle Phil would live with them, that they could all like live together. That was kind of early on in season 1, and then later on it all came to a head. But yeah, so then Uncle Phil moves away. He goes to Hollywood to start an acting career. And now he just comes back and visits. But you can see George and Uncle Philip, he doesn't go by Uncle Phil, Uncle Philip kind of have a little bit of a tense relationship.
Yeah, well, this is one thing that I think the episode gives you a nice little perspective on. It starts out with George just like privately lamenting to Catherine that, Philip gets to do the fun stuff. He says, I get to teach Webster how to floss, but he gets to take him to amusement parks and stuff. So, it's that usual thing with the uncle versus the parents.
Or
and
the like mom versus the dad who, like, when you're single parents and the dad gets you for the fun weekends and the mom has to do the homework. And all that.
Yeah. In this case, they're his guardians, so they have to do all the nuts and bolts stuff. So it kind of lays that out. out at the beginning. And then at some point, how does it even come up
so
that Webster wants
Webster's
a
been
dog?
asking. Webster has been asking for a dog. So he always has these very sort of like serious but manipulative conversations with George and Ma'am. He's always trying to convince them to like do things his way.
Yes, he is a little Machiavelli.
Oh yeah,
Yes,
and
he is.
and it's no different in this one. He definitely is like trying to manipulate them into.
This is the most manipulative
Yes,
I've ever seen
It's
him.
very true. Into doing what he wants, and they they have a conversation, and basically what they come to is. They both work and he's at school all day and there's no one and they're in a rental because their house burned because Webster burned their apartment down. And so they can't have a dog. It's not the right time.
Right.
They don't say no. They say it's not the right time.
Yes. Now, that's some of the things that they say. Some of the other things that they say during that conversation are George is generally he's the one who's more in favor of it. And he
He
throws
wants a
out
dog
things
too.
like, oh, I would be nice to have a dog because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And then Ma'am, of course, always has a story at the ready from her girlhood.
Like when she threw the match down the elevator shaft and
we
burned
got
down
to
her
see
whole apartment building.
Glassy-eyed monologue that
she's like Drew
ready.
Barrymore in Firestarter.
Yeah, getting ready for the Golden Globes. This time, she's talking about how she had a dog and it did something with her butler.
Farnsworth. They named it Farnsworth, and then he bit the butler, and the butler quit. So then
she had
ended
to
up.
buttle.
Not only did she have to take care of the dog, because so that was her parents told her no because she wasn't responsible. She got the dog anyway, and then the butler ended up being the one taking care of it, and then the butler got annoyed that he had to take care of a dog when that wasn't in his job responsibilities, and then he got bit, and so he quit, and so her punishment was her parents made her be the butler.
Yes.
Until they got a replacement butler, and then they sent Farnsworth off to a good home.
Yes, and the writers are very fond of this buttled thing. She goes, "You bet I buttled. I buttled my little butt off." Right? They just like that turn of phrase. So. Like you said, it is not, the words, I guess, you may not have a dog are not spoken, but Webster understands just as well as we, the audience, do that he does not have permission to purchase a dog at this juncture.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And Uncle Phil comes for his usual,
Philip.
occasional visitation. And
he comes to visit.
Yeah. And Webster sits down with him and is very selective about the information that he shares with Philip.
Exactly. He says that what George said was that he really wanted a dog and how great it would be to have one around, and that Ma'am used to have a dog and she loved him very much.
Yes. Philip is trying to be straightforward. He's trying to say, we can't just buy a dog. You're we
you're
don't
living
have
with your
permission.
parents.
Yeah, and then
you're
Webster
living with
starts
these
saying
people.
all these little sideways things. And so he's like, so you're saying it's okay with them? And Webster's like, what I'm saying is, Ma'am clearly said she has fond memories of dogs.
Right, exactly. And Uncle Philip is like, you know what? I always buy you a present when I come, but I never buy the whole family a present.
Yeah.
So I think, you know what? I think that's a good idea. And let's not go to the pet store.
Yes.
That was the inciting incident. The last time Uncle Philip came to visit, they went to a pet store and he played with the dog there. And that's why he was remembering that this morning, asking about if he could have a dog.
Okay.
That's why it came up. And so now Uncle Philip's back and he's like, I want to go back to that pet store. And Uncle Philip's like, no. If you're going to get a dog, you're not going to get it from a pet store. Let's go to the pound. Let's adopt a dog.
He's an early adopter, pun intended, of the rescue dog instead of the pet shop thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Adopt, don't shop. So they go to the pound and they get the cutest little puppy.
Yeah.
And
it's basically the same kind of dog in every show, right? Like,
no, this isn't a golden retriever. This is some other type of dog that's going to have a little bit more floppy hair.
Yeah, it doesn't. You're right. It doesn't look like exactly the same, but it's. I feel like as dogs go, it's definitely in the same quadrant as the golden retrievers that they often use.
So anyway, he has this dog with a bottle for like the entirety of the episode. It is 100% a puppy that is still bottle feeding, which, by the way, in these days, they don't let you have dogs that young. Like, you can't adopt a dog that is that little.
Yeah, I wasn't even really aware that was the thing with dogs. We certainly didn't do that. I don't think our dog really was a puppy. But yeah, there are two basic strategies they have to keep this live dog like engaged with Webster. One, have him be in a little sack almost all the time. So Webster
that's right. He's in a
around
backpack,
in
and
a
his little head is sticking out, just like I do with Dee Dee Pickles.
And have Webster constantly feeding him out of a bottle. So the dog is just always focused on this bottle. So it has no reason to do anything but stay in his little sack with Webster.
Or stay in
Webster
the box in the scene. Exactly.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, and you know what? Good job, Emmanuel Lewis, for managing all of that business.
Yes.
When the dog, by the way, when he holds the dog is nearly as long as Webster is.
Yeah.
Even though it's a puppy. Like, that's how tiny Emmanuel
Webster
Lewis
is famously tiny.
Yeah.
And yeah, look, like we always said, this, well, actually, I'm going to backtrack on that. The one where Webster saved the diner, he had no manipulation at all, except he sort of manipulated the grumpy sister a little bit. But that was
but not even
good.
Really. Yeah.
Right. The one where
he is always very earnest, but he is earnest in his way of being manipulative. Yeah. And it was like you said, in this episode in particular, I was like, geez,
he
Webster,
is straight up dastardly.
You're kind of a bad kid.
Yeah. I feel like what he does in this, because it's so premeditated and so prolonged, it's not like when he set the fire, it was like, oh, he made a mistake and they told him not to, but he did it anyway.
He played with the chemistry set instead of not.
Thing. In this one, this is like a plot. This is like a plan.
Yeah. And then he doubles down because after they find the dog, he sends Uncle Philip home before George and Ma'am can see him and know about the dog.
Yeah.
And then
hides the dog, just like the alligator.
Exactly. Hides the dog, but then they find the dog and then they're like, okay, we have to take him back tomorrow. And he's like, no, you can't take him back because they kill dogs, at the pound, and I don't want him to go back. And what are we going to do? And so then he hides the dog again and makes it seem as
Stages
though
a runaway.
The dog has run away.
Now this is, I'll make the same criticism of Ma'am and George that I did of the dad in My Three Sons. At some, they're having this whole talk about why it's not the right time for a pet or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then at some point, Ma'am, right, Catherine says offhand to George or maybe to Ben Vereen, the lease clearly says no dogs. So why was that not the start and end of this conversation from the beginning,
From back at the beginning. Well, but it was. But the thing of it is that they talked about having the dog more than just getting it right now. And that's the thing. That's why they were trying to clarify to Webster, we're not saying no. We're saying it's not the right time. Yeah, because of our living situation that you caused.
Yeah, that's true, because of your various shenanigans. And so they have Philip over, they have a family conference after they discover, time after time, the giveaway is the dog is always hidden in the closet, it barks, they find him. That's how Webster's plans are
They realize
foiled.
that the runaway is staged and that it's not true. So they go upstairs to have a chat with him. Dog barks and they're like, all right, family meeting. Uncle Philip comes back. They have a conference. They talk about it.
Philip is like, I've been waiting for you guys to thank me for getting this dog.
Yeah.
And
they're like, oh, no. And so then Webster's caught in all of his web of lies.
Yes, literally. That's what this show should have been called, Web of Lies.
Webster of Lies. Yeah. And so he comes clean and he apologizes but he doesn't even get punished, right? He is told, well, we'll keep the dog till we can find a good home for it, because the landlords who you like you were mentioning before, they're friendly with, have come back in and they're like, oh, it's okay. We'll agree. Like, we understand what happened. Like, your kid has tricked you and that's very funny. So we'll allow you to have this dog until you can find a good home for
Webster has a final moment of manipulation where he goes, he mentions something about George singing to him, and Catherine's like, oh, I didn't know you sang, George. And he's like, yeah, sing, George, but don't just sing for me, sing for Farnsworth. Like, he's still turning on that freaking...
To try to get Catherine and everybody else in the room to allow him to keep this dog for even longer.
Yeah, but they also, I like how they sort of bring the parent-uncle thing full circle, because Philip starts talking about how, like he acknowledges, oh, I get to just do these
Fun
little
stuff.
outings, but you guys, like, raise him. Like,
you get
guys
the real
are
stuff,
one...
and he's jealous, and George, like, he's jealous of George, and George is jealous of him. So they have a little heart-to-heart that sort of heals over all of the custody issues that they were fighting about in court the previous season.
Yeah, and it sort of makes George appreciate, like, oh yeah, like, I get to actually, like, teach him and mold him.
And put him into bed and sing these songs to him.
Yeah, exactly. So it's nice from that point of view. But yeah, it's true sitcom style, nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? The dog is going to be gone, I assume, the next time.
Yeah, I don't ever remember them having a dog, but, maybe another episode, but I don't remember.
So you're right. This does sort of follow the model of the Leave It to Beaver thing, keeping the secret. Ma'am puts it best. She says, when we say no, we mean it, right? That's the lesson that Webster has to learn. Whereas in Leave It to Beaver, they didn't say, can we get an alligator? And the parents said no. It was more like their weird little scheme that they then decided.
Dad said we couldn't get a dog, but he didn't say anything about an alligator.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Let's switch gears a little bit with Will and Grace.
Season 1, Episode 9, The Truth About Will and Dogs.
Yep, that episode title, of course, is a reference to The Truth About Cats and Dogs, the
Uma Thurman movie from the 90s.
Beloved rom-com that, I feel like anybody even 2 or 3 years younger than us probably doesn't remember.
I was like, was it a beloved rom-com?
No, I'm being sarcastic. I don't think it has much of a footprint. This is the one where she is like Uma Thurman's like a radio, it's
like
Uma
a
Thurman
Frasier
and Janine
type.
Garofalo.
Yeah, she's like a Frasier type love advice on the radio.
I've never seen it, honestly.
That is all I remember about
like
it. I forgot Janine Garofalo was her bestie in it.
Yeah, I thought it was more of like a Cyrano type thing where some sort of play on like Janine Garofalo is like the smart one and Uma Thurman's the pretty one and they have to help each other or something.
Oh, who knows?
I don't know. But anyway, that would have been fresh in everyone's mind for this 1998 sitcom. This starts at game night, right? They're with their friends, and Will is annoyed because their friends are talking about their dogs a lot.
Yes. The friends keep interrupting the game night to talk about their dogs as though they are their children. And Will and Grace, like this is a trope throughout the series of Will and Grace, that they are so good at game night. Like they basically, they're a better couple than any of their other couple friends that are married, hetero couples, because they have like this intricate inside friend language that they've developed since college, and they can guess each other's clues in 2 words.
Yeah, and of course, when you're on a sitcom and you're playing buzzword or whatever it is they're playing, it's their way to get little digs about celebrities. I forget what even the thing is, but it's
I didn't
some
even
like
think about
nasty
that, but
little
that's exactly what
joke
they're doing.
About some celebrity to get them
like
to
being fat or whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But this all gets kicked into motion pretty fast. Grace wants Will to get a dog.
Well, Grace wants to get a dog, and it's Will's apartment. So, like, this is, again, lore of the show. Grace moved in with Will into his apartment at some point prior to the series starting.
We should just say, let me pause you for a second and just say it's interesting how these are almost all season 1 episodes.
Yeah, season 1 and 2.
Webster.
I was noticing that.
So this is one of your like sort of first ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's not a staid trope. Yeah. But it's still tropey enough. It's still relatable, but not jump the sharky.
Yeah.
So Grace is like, I really want to get a dog. And all the friends start making fun of her. Jack and Karen are there, and they start teasing her because it's like, oh, that's her biological clock ticking. And she's like, no, I just think it would be nice. And, we could both take care of it or whatever. And Will's like, absolutely not. And she's like, whatever, I'm going to do what I want to do. Like, leave me alone. And so she gets a dog. And then Will is up in arms that she got the dog. She goes to the bathroom. She comes out of the bathroom, and now he's like, oh, she's my baby.
Now, we got a scene. We watched this like 2 hours ago, and I already forgot. Is it a real pound? Do we get like lots of real dogs when they go? Because Jack, that's what I thought. Jack and Karen, the three of them go to the pound together. So we get that fun scene because ultimately Jack is in favor of Will getting a dog because he thinks they're man magnets. He wants that thing of like walking the dog. And,
exactly. He's like, Will's stupid. He doesn't realize that even if it's your dog and he can, walk it sometimes, like how great this will be for him to find a boyfriend. Yeah. So I wrote in my notes, same kind of dog as Webster, ? This one's more just a straight up golden retriever. This is a golden retriever puppy. Kind of like, this is Comet from Full House. Yes. Right? Same kind of dog as that. And I feel like they must be like, I guess they're just very trainable or something. Well, Goldens and Labs are both very trainable. But so this is a golden retriever puppy. It's a little bit older than the dog that we saw in Webster, but still very puppy-ish. Yeah. But these are grown-ups, so they're able to hold the dog and handle the dog a little bit better. Now, I have to say, I guess Will in general, he's a sort of uptight kind of guy. That's part of his character, right? So, that's part of why he doesn't want to have a dog around. I would guess his lease would forbid it too, but there are some apartments in the city, of course, where you can have dogs. It did stress me out when he started playing with the dog on the couch. I'm like, his clothes are too nice to be messing around with the dog. He's just like, he's wearing his yuppie like getup suit, his impeccable, really nice, expensive suit. And I'm like, dude, you have to change into a t-shirt before you start letting that dog crawl all over you. You'd be covered in dog hair, just like I always have. Yeah. We get this sort of classic turn, again, very sitcom-y, of now he is in love with the dog. He's obsessed with the dog. He thinks of it as his child. Oh, yeah. And he is like, enough. he's not just a little bit into this dog, right? Like, that's the whole crux of this episode, is that not only does he get into the dog, but he changes his whole life into dog dad life. Yeah. And he won't go out anymore, and he's talking to clients, but every other word he's feeding the dog what do you want, little puppy? What do you want? Yeah. And so the merger that we're working on is don't you want another liver snack? Yeah. And he's not concentrating at work. He's totally letting this dog infect his life. He's not leaving the house anymore. He doesn't want to go out. Right. He doesn't want to do anything. He doesn't approve of doggy daycare. Right, because I don't know these people. Yeah, so when they have to go to work, he wants them to switch days at first and take turns taking him to work, and that leads to various misadventures. The dog pees on some lawyer or something at his firm. The dog pees on a file about the merger that I was just aforementioned merger, and then he picks up the file to hand to the client, and the pee is on it, and it sprays all over the client, and the client has a great joke where he's like, well, I'm a little pissed. Yeah, he goes, don't be mad. He goes, I'm just a little pissed. Yeah. And then Grace watches the dog. It's her day at work, and the dog eats, this $2,000 a yard silk damask that she had specially delivered from the EU. That she was in the process of recommending to the client. Yep, exactly. No, that the client had specifically requested. Or the client was requesting. And it had taken a very long time for it to come in because it was coming from France or whatever. And so, that basically the dog causes problems at both of their work. Grace again is like, well, doggy daycare, and Will's not having it. And he's just the whole house now is everything's doggy this, doggy that. And Grace puts her foot down. She's like, we haven't been out of the house in a week. Yeah. I'm going to lose my mind. I called babysitters. We're going out. And then in walk Jack and Karen, and they're going to babysit the dog for the night. And Will is like, he can't leave. He can't stop telling them extra information. The veterinarian's number's on the fridge, and I'll take my cell phone, back in the 1998 when we had to tell people we would take our phone because that wasn't normal. He's like, oh, I'll take my cell phone so you can reach me, and the number's there, and da-da-da-da. And then he leaves, and he gets hit on at the movie theater, but he doesn't pay attention to the guy hitting on him because he's too busy talking about about the dog to Grace.
Yes, Will is on a very sitcom-y journey. They stop in at a bar, and Will is going like, I noticed that you bought the cheap kibble, right? Like he can't stop talking about the dog.
Their whole like date night out, that's all he's talking about, and she's annoyed.
Yeah. So when they finally go back, I guess eventually Jack takes the dog out. Jack wants to go man hunting or whatever and take the dog out for a walk.
Because he's babysitting.
Yeah. Jack and Karen both come over to dog sit. They get home, they're panicked, or Will is panicked.
Yeah, Grace
they're
is
not there.
Will is like, Will's insane. Grace is like, oh no, Jack probably took him out for a walk.
Yeah.
And he did, and he had a great time manhunting in the park. He met lots of attractive men who were obsessed with him and the dog.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting when they get back and Grace is kind of like, all right, this has gone too far. You need to, you've gone gaga over this dog.
Because he also has been like judging the way she treats the dog. Like anytime the dog does something bad and she scolds it, he's like, it's his formative years. And I just don't think that you should, talk to him that way. You shamed him in front of his friends.
Yes, he didn't approve
and
of the
she's
shaming.
like, I'm not your mother. You know what I mean? Like when he comes to me and says he wants to be gay, I'll allow him to be
gay.
There's
a lot of mother stuff. There's several
and
back
then
and forths
that's
about
what
the
this
mothers.
this fight kind of devolves into again, because Will is saying that she is nitpicking him and the dog just like her mother does, and she was like, don't you take that mother turn, because I got a whole lot of ammo sitting in my belt. And Jack's got the dog and he's like, oh no, disharmony, my parents are fighting. Oh no.
They get a lot of mileage out of Jack being behind the dog and lifting him up on his hind legs and kind of like puppeting him.
Using him like a marionette.
Dog like that. But what I noticed about this part was Grace's proof positive that Will has gone too far with the dog is that he has pictures of the dog in his wallet.
Right.
And that's meant to be like a laugh line for everybody.
Like that's
it's
not
sort
a
of like,
normal thing.
And I don't know, like now the pictures in your wallet thing has kind of gone by the wayside because now everyone has pictures on their phone. And you would definitely have pictures of your dog on your phone. Do you think it's strange? I didn't carry around pictures of my dog in my wallet.
No, because nobody does that. But I know an awful lot of men our age that carry around pictures of their kids in their wallet still. So, like, if you are going to have pictures in your wallet, it's going to be of your kids.
But they don't have kids.
And so you just wouldn't have pictures in your wallet. Like, you just don't have pictures in your wallet.
But I do, I just think, like, people, again, like going to the phone thing, people have their front phone
of course.
Thing
and
be
I've had my dog be
and
that.
So,
to me, but it's not the same. It's a different thing. Because that means you would have to have had pictures taken and printed of your dog to put them in the wallet.
Yeah, I just don't know if I would find it that strange. Maybe if there were like, if he had 4 little picture holders and they were all the dog, I would think that was weird.
But one is fine.
I
think you're a weirdo.
If he had like one of his parents, one of
he doesn't have anything but the dog. Stop making up scenarios.
Then I guess that's a little strange. What it all comes out to, and I related to this, is they sort of acknowledge like this is all a way of procrastinating getting back into the dating field, right? That Will isn't comfortable dating yet, and so he's putting all of his energy, all of his love basically into this dog, which I feel like I did that for a solid decade and loved every minute of it.
Me too. I still do. I'm like, Jay who? My dog's the best.
When I got my cat, like in my early 30s, and I was like a single loner weirdo at that time, like I totally settled into like, okay, like that was one of like 5 pieces of the puzzle of me just being like totally satisfied in my like single life for the next like 6 or 7 years.
Oh, 100%. As an adult, I have basically always had a dog, and I had a very similar experience to Grace when I got my first dog as a grown-up. I went my husband at the time and I had an argument about whether or not to get a dog. I had said I was going to get one that next summer when I was off and I could train it up and it would be fine before I had to go back to work. And he was like, yeah, whatever. Didn't believe me. So summer came and I'm like, I'm going to the pound tomorrow. I'm going to get a dog. And he's like, what do you mean? I don't want a dog. We're not getting a dog. You're not responsible enough to take care of a dog. Like all the things you would say to a child, because that's how he treated me. And I was like, whatever, just like Grace, I'm going to do what I want to do. And I went.
Or any of the characters in this. Or did you go to some family member and say like, well, did they go, your husband is okay with it? And you were like, well, he said that he had a dog once.
Oh no, I 100% said to my mom, he's telling me I can't get a dog, but he's not the boss. I'll do whatever the hell I want. And so I go and pick out my old dog Ella, and came home. And that night, my husband came home. He was so angry. He was like, oh, what is this thing? I hate this thing. My mom happened to be in town. We went out the next day because it was a Saturday for like a brunch or something, came back, come into the house, and there is Ella and my ex-husband on the couch just like, oh, I love you so much. You're the best dog ever. Oh, yes, yes, yes. And that was it. And I was like, oh, you didn't want a dog, did you?
Yeah, he pulled a Will.
He did. Okay. Jack gets the dog in the end. Will and Grace decide that they really, it isn't right for them to have a dog because they really can't take care of it the way they want. And they are using it to, hide away from some other more scary things like getting back in the dating pool. So who do they know that's always home, has a lot of time on their hands, and doesn't have any problem dating?
Right. And has been in favor of dog from day one because of the dating possibilities.
And so Jack has the dog. He will have the dog for the remainder of the series. You don't see him a lot, but he pops back in and out. At the end of this episode, I don't think they've named the dog yet, but then he ends up naming the dog. I think it's Klaus Van Puppy or Klaus Van Pooch or something like that.
Interesting.
That is the name of the dog. And eventually.
Yeah. So obviously that one, sort of swerved a little bit because there are no kids involved. So we get a little bit of brief secrecy. Yeah. But yeah, like you said, still kind of the same debates about like whether or not it's a good idea.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how old you are. There's always someone in your life who's going to tell you you're not old enough and responsible enough to take care of a dog. Like, thank you for putting me down.
Yeah.
Like Will says to Grace, you're not responsible enough for that. It's like, screw you.
All right, so what do we think? Lots of good stuff here. I liked all of these dog episodes.
Yeah, this was a really good lineup. I think the Beaver one was a special surprise because we didn't know going into it that the turn at the end that the dad would have bought, or the parents would have bought them a dog.
Yeah.
That was a surprise. So that was a fun one. And I liked that one for all the little like weird alligator stuff that was in it, right? Like that one was so quirky and fun. It almost was like something a show today would do to upend the old tropes and have it be like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they get an alligator instead of a dog.
Yeah, and they have these same conversations, but it's, I don't know. There's just something about it that I thought was really fun. Yeah, what's happening, I appreciated. I want to see an episode of What's Happening where there's more of the comedy that I remember from like the few watchings that I did, because I'm just sort of like remembering. I'm just having like little shadow memories of different times I've seen it, and like now truly parsing Rerun from Fat Albert in my mind.
Yeah, these are all pretty good. I feel like Will and Grace kind of does the least with it, even though it's always pretty good. Yeah. But just like compared with the antics that some of the other ones get up to, it is actually just
evil
a little,
Webster.
Yeah, like to just fall back on the thing of like, oh, he's anti-dog at first, and then he goes whole hog, and now he loves the dog. It's like, that's pretty good. But yeah, some of these go to some really fun places, and I agree with you. In a lot of ways, the Leave It to Beaver one is just so unexpected, and that funny character of the alligator expert,
Captain Jack.
Yeah, telling them all of this like wild misinformation about alligators and saying you have to show your alligator the proper love so he doesn't get depressed and lose the will to live. Yeah, that was all pretty good. You don't
want a sad alligator.
Yeah, and again, Webster, just for the straight up like it's like watching like The Sopranos or a Succession, like the workings of
if he had a crew behind him that was supporting all of his machinations.
He's like,
he'd be dangerous.
like Kevin Spacey in the one where he's the president.
Don't talk about him.
Pulling the strings of all the like
House of Cards.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, now I'll just tell my uncle that they said this. Yeah, just straight up sinister Webster was something to behold. And
play these two factions that went to court over me against each other now that they've finally settled on a truce.
Yeah,
Let me see if I can make them fight again.
Yeah, but I actually kind of loved the what's happening, even though you didn't even ever see a dog.
Yeah.
Which I kind of appreciate, because again, I don't necessarily think a sitcom set is the best place for a dog.
I was worried you were going to say you didn't like this episode because it was like the same old thing of like the minimum amount of communication.
It is that same old thing, but there's so much of it. Like, again, this was like a farce where you had like 4 full scenes all based around this misunderstanding that a dog had puppies instead of a human woman having babies. Like,
or a human teenager.
So absurd.
Yeah.
And so, and that I have that image in my mind of Mama sitting there on the couch with the little girl perched on her shoulder, just sneering at Roger. Like it was very funny. And just, again, the audience just losing their minds when he's like, what's the problem? I'll have my friends help me. We're all going to do it together and we're going to make lots of money.
And she's like, you're doing it for money?
Yeah, just all of that. I think the sitcom, craziness of it really worked for me.
Yeah.
I feel like that's why we watch the old shows. So yeah, lots of good stuff here. All right, so much for Getting a Dog. What are we talking about next week?
Next week, can boy bands act? We're going to check out some boy band guest appearances on some throwback shows. We're watching Fuller House Season 2, Episode 10, New Kids in the House, featuring the New Kids on the Block. Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Season 2, Episode 18, the band episode featuring the Backstreet Boys. Just Shoot Me, Season 5, Episode 2, A Night at the Plaza, featuring 98 Degrees and iCarly. Season 6, Episode 2, I Go One Direction, featuring Guess Who?
Yep, boy bands are next week, and until then, we will consider this segment of the sitcom study concluded. Thank you for listening to the Sitcom Study. Tell us what you think or share your own TV tropes and topic ideas by sending a self-addressed stamped email to sitcomstudypodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram. And if you like the show, consider leaving a rating or review on your podcast app. It helps us boost those precious Nielsen ratings. The Sitcom Study is recorded in front of a live studio dog.